Hi, this is Privateer Station, and today we're bringing you day 587 of Russian war with Ukraine. As always, with former advisor to the office of the President of Ukraine, Lieutenant Colonel Alexey Arestovych, Nikolai Feldman, and Yuri Romanenko are his pals in this stream. And our thanks go today to Morbiel and Vadim Cherdak, our members. Thank you for supporting us, as well as the Sun Express and Bill for super thanks. And Brett Zimmerman also, thank you for your support. With this, let's go into day 587, when Alexey Arestovych becomes a wanted man in Putin's Russia. Enjoy. Hello, everybody. This is Project Alpha. My name is Nikolai Feldman. We're starting a war diary with Alexey Arestovych. It's October 3rd, day 587. Alexey is online. Yuri Romanenko is online. Good evening, gentlemen. Good evening, everybody. All right, friends, let's start with topic number 1 in our stream. Alexey Arestovych is now a wanted man in Russian Federation. And this all is happening on the background that some of the Ukrainian congressmen from the party Servant of People are also calling upon special services to arrest Alexei upon his return to Ukraine. Let's talk about this, Alexei. Yeah, one of my subscribers wrote today that Russia and Ukraine are now fighting about the birthrights for Arestovych. And the other one that I liked was that once a month, Ukrainian security is asking Arestovych to leave the country once to uncover Russian agents who start their hysteria immediately and start screaming that they should be the ones allowed to leave the country and not Alexei. So what can I comment here? They're ideological brothers. They're indeed ideological 100% brothers. It's just once one of them wants us to march from one concentration camp into another concentration camp under the Russian tricolor flag, and the other want to do the same thing for us, the same destiny, but only under yellow-blue flag. So one needs to understand, we need to get it as a nation, that it's not about the language and the name, it's about the rights. They either exist or they don't, and freedoms. I talked with Yuri, to Kasparov, and some other guys on that forum that we attended the last couple of days, and we talked to Russian Democrats who were going back in a history into 80s and then into the whole story of democratic movement development in Russia. So they were correcting each other, very delicately discussing what and when it took the right turn, the wrong turn. So I want to say, if that didn't take a wrong turn with Putin, Russia would have been in the same position as we are now, or even better. So when some people are saying they're born this way, it's genetic, it's complete idiocy. It's just they made one turn along this path and we did another. They talked about Bolotnaya Square, about the protests of 2014, 2011, 2012, and when Navalny, remember, when they had those Bolotnaya events back in the day, when Navalny came out with a microphone and said, we could capture Central Voting Commission right now, but we're not going to do that. And they had that chance for open for maybe 2 or 3 days. By the 2nd of February, it was too late. So there are a lot of turns of history where Russia could have made a different choice. And some people were talking about how was Ukraine back in the 90s. When did we have communists almost won? Yeah, we had in the 90s, Group 239, almost constitutional majority. So who was electing those communists? The free-loving Ukrainians who have freedom in our blood? What other myths do we have about ourselves? So this whole story is rather specific, and it's easy for us now to project all the grievances onto Russia, but I do want to remind our listeners that Russia hosted Novgorod Republic, Russia had Cossack freedoms, Russia had different vectors of development. And when Moscow suppressed everybody with the horde, with the aid of the Mongolian horde, that became a trend. But there were still other vectors. On Bolotnaya in 2012, that was basically Russian Maidan. Why are we not calling it so? Because we as participants, we can easily recognize the same energies, the same moves, the same emotional ups and downs. We understand that it's a very similar event, just one occurred in Kiev, another occurred in Moscow. And this is the bright side of it. And now the dark side is they have the same people on both sides. In Russia, they want to put people in jail for wrong thoughts. In Ukraine, we also have some people peddling the same thing. They are not different. It's a type, it's an archetype. It's people who want to be NKVD, Stalin's oppressive regime officers. It just one of them have red markings on their shoulders, others would have yellow. And you know, a friend of mine, when he was told there are different shades of political doctrines, he had a good response to that. It doesn't matter how you kick the stool from under somebody's feet to hang him. You're still turning that into National Socialism. So you can kick that stool under any slogan, but if that's what you're doing to an opponent, to somebody whom you disagree with, that's National Socialism. You will see them by their fruit, by the fruit of their deeds. So I'm usually attacked by two groups of people, ours and Russians. Ours of a certain type and Russians of a certain type. And there are two groups of people who love me. Free-loving Ukrainians and free-loving Russians. Freedom-loving. Only Americans have no qualms with me. You know why? Because they're free in general. And here, it's always a fight between freedom and not freedom. And that fight goes not even across the border or front line. It goes through the brain. And our fascism or National Socialism or chauvinism, however you call it, is not in any way better than Russian. And the fact that it masquerades itself under the slogans of freedom, it only changes clothes, and these clothes become rather hole-ridden ones, so you can see through. And we should be careful running down that road, because very soon we might see those crematoriums on the horizon. So, Alexey, I want to address another thing. These waves of hate that periodically appear around your person, they are connected with different events. Remember, when you talk about a seminar, when you uploaded the seminar, they cut a piece of it and they ran with it to turn it into some weird light. And yesterday also, we had a journalist from some Baltic countries who asked a question that Arestovich at the beginning of the war said that Russia and Ukraine will jointly occupy Europe. I immediately remembered the context when you said that. And I said that, yeah, your context was that if Ukraine loses, Russia will capture Ukraine and then will use Ukraine resources to continue their conquest of Europe. Just like that happened many times during history earlier. Everything happens in the same scenario, Yuri. I'll tell you more. I even said that not in the beginning of war. At the beginning, I think I mentioned it maybe once. That video that they are using, that's from 2017. That's a well-known video where I predicted this war. But they took a different piece from that video, and there was another piece cut from it before saying, oh, he's amazing, he predicted the war. This piece is actually, they're now peddling and saying how awful he is. So my friends in cybersecurity in Ukraine, in services, they showed me the trends. How did it look like? How did social networks were relating to each other in Russia and in Ukraine of certain political parties? They supported each other and they quoted each other. They worked together jointly to attack me when I made a mistake saying what missile hit the house when I resigned from the position. So you could see that on the graphs. They're just joint at the hip, and that repeats over and over again. That's to support my thesis that they're one and the same. I want to ask you another question, Alexey. Oleg Dunda and Yuri, you had Oleg Dunda there at the conference. Maybe I did not watch it attentively, but I did not see him expressing his disagreement with what was said at the forum during the forum, right? No. He actually blew up in one point when I said that we're in a dilemma of Bolsheviks and SRs. He actually blew up a little bit and said that some people don't know history, pointing at me, basically. Well, yeah, but he didn't say that in Alexei's words he's seeing the signs of treason or something. No. Komsomol leaders, they don't do it like that. They don't tell the truth to your eyes. They, after the fact, they run and write a report to their KGB or whatever they can. So I was wondering, maybe anything happened during the forum? You guys had another discussion? No, we only heard him on a stream, on a telemedia. He was in Kiev, we were in Tallinn. But he takes any criticism so painfully, right, that the only way to get rid of your opponent is to invite your opponent to jail. And that's the congressman of a European country. Parliament is a place for discussion, by the way, right? That's where ideas need to be discussed. And if you cannot win, it wasn't even a spar, it wasn't really a fight. It was just barely touched on a topic. But apparently he felt so much soul discomfort that he appealed to put Arestovich in jail after that. Imagine the size of ego that you need to have in order to be offended by something like that. Your ego need to be the size of the tallest mountain. And these are people are part of our political elite. This is the party of power. And then we start waving hands and we start in a discussion. Oh my God, are we turning somewhere wrong with our strategy? And then more and more we hear from the West that, by the way, we need to change the strategy of the war. And we can talk about changing the strategy today too. Do you think these people can change their strategy? Ours? Yeah, ours. I have concerns about it. Let me add here a bit. Irina on my channel is writing, thinking Ukrainians do not even pay attention to hate. There are not too many hating people as a percentage of our society. But I did want to elaborate that they do create, those who are falling into that hate world, they create falsehoods, false contexts. They cut certain phrases out of the context and they twist them. And they send people's motions and moods in the direction they like. And then after everything is lost, these people who did all that, played all these shenanigans, then they sit like Petura in Paris somewhere and they shake their head and say, well, we effed up. But why did you F up? Because you were tearing ideas apart, accusing your allies, leaving the country without resources, without supporters. And I want to add here a bit. You can't imagine, I want to add to you what you said, Yuri. You can't imagine how monkey-like do we look to the outside world, to our allies in the West. How undeveloped we are in terms of these societal things. And we can remember that overtone window. We can remind our viewers that the basis for any propaganda is a repeated motive over and over again that eventually becomes norm. The opponents we face, they want to make that norm, because in normal life, they are nobody. This is means for their unfair competition on the political landscape. Radical parties have never won anything in our parliament, barely scraped 1% or 0.5% at some point. And now they got a chance to rise on their radical rhetoric on the basis of the military and war trauma. That story is repeated over and over again. They're trying to suppress people whom they cannot face for even half a minute in discussion. And what they do, they blow up schizoid hysteria and they try to press the buttons of people's traumas. And people who are traumatized by war, by all the horrors that are happening around, many of them do react. They usually react even in usual life, in civil life, but during war, the wave goes real high, it spikes. And very often people start hating things 10 or 15 times more intensive. And it's a known fact that negative news, they spread 10 or 15 times faster than positive news. That's just the way humanity is. I guess it's because it's wired deeper. And when early in history, some tribal men were meeting on the forest path, they needed time to tell each other about dangers. And that's our evolutionary aspect. We react to danger first, and then only then we react to good things. And our civilization effort is to react to good things first, and only then to react to dangers and keep them somewhat controlled. But from the outside, for civilized people, these relations, like are unfolding now, they look like a fight in a monkey cage in a zoo. And when we touch upon questions of corruption, questions of transfer of arms, questions of war perspectives, why do you think people believe less and less about the borders of 1991 and stories about our heroic win that will bring everything back? And they're not too leaning to paying us for all that, because they've already passed through that evolutionary step. They're on a different stage now, and they see where we are. They understand that these mistakes we're making is definitely a concern, that this strategy might not get us where we want to. You know, it's just like a good swimmer. He sees somebody who is swimming across a big strait. He judges the style and says, no, this guy will probably drown. It's time to go and save them, even though the dude is still swimming. And, you know, when Duda attacked us on our position with grain and all, and he did the right things. He noticed the right things, that we are making certain mistakes, that we need saving. And there was another commentary that was spread in the West, how America sees Ukraine these days. I'm trying to remember. Flint, the immigrant, one of ours, he drew a picture of what America sees now in Ukraine. And it was reposted here and collected so much hate. But now, in autumn, our military are actually changing their strategy in the same way as the guy predicted back in his article. So, turns out he was right. So all these emotional screams, ups and downs, this is one of the main barriers. This behavior is one of the main barriers for our society to make proper critical understanding of reality. Because the one who screams and throws things, he cannot accept the reality the way it is, because he's too busy screaming and throwing poop at his opponent. And then he makes wrong bets, and what does it end with? Right? If everything is lost, then the best of them might immigrate and may be buried in Paris. Most likely won't even have a chance to. So some people seems like they still want to repeat that history. That chain of events is very short. I hope we don't go there. Thank you for explaining. There were a lot of questions about this theme, Alexey, but I think we'll switch that into a different format later. It probably deserves a different deep dive from some philosophic, ethical point. Let's just get Datsuk and talk on Friday about that. Nikolai? Yeah, sure, I think we should. Okay, so about important news that are in the framework of reviewing our strategy. I want to start with yesterday's publication by Ben Wallace, ex-Minister of Defense of Britain, who said the following: Ukraine must draft more people into the army to increase the tempo of counteroffensive. I'm quoting, I understand Zelensky's desire to save youth for the future, but the fact is that Russia is mobilizing their troops, and it's time to face that Ukraine needs more people on the front. This war can be won, but Ukraine needs to match certain numbers, and he gives certain numbers layout, that Ukraine needs to follow these numbers. He says that average age of soldier on the front is over 40. So he's making a conclusion that if Ukraine wants to win this war, Ukraine must not slow down the tempo of counteroffensive, and the only way to do that is by total mobilization of youth. So what do you think about that statement? What did he give an average age of an infantry? Over 40. Over 40. All right. I would say an average age of Ukrainian infantry is probably even 45. And now imagine a gentleman of that age. Most Ukrainians don't really go to gym daily at 45, and by their health, they're not the ones who running for miles in their military shoes and don't follow diet and don't see doctors much. So by 45, they're not in the best physical state. This person gets loaded certain amount of gear, bulletproof vest and a helmet and rifle, and he needs to go somewhere, and the average size of the gray zone is about 5-6 kilometers. Where now we're hunting, both sides are hunting individual infantrymen. If they see one, you might see a drone attacking the person, and if there are two, they might even start artillery strike on them. Or perhaps you're being put on an armored vehicle and then you're shaking on these fields, expecting to either run a landmine or get hit by artillery, and then you have to jump off and run through the grove and shooting and throwing grenades. Do you think how many people will actually achieve the result at the end? It's difficult, right? Maybe 5 of them will get to the end, the rest won't. And those people they might not even be afraid. They may want to go and do the work, but they just physically don't get there. So most commanders eventually come to the same conclusion. First, they really want a good storm group. They pick the best radio man, the best sniper, the best submachine guns, the best machine gunner. Then it turns out that they are all of a different physical condition. So when you strain them, some of them don't make it to the end. They just fall behind. And then you have to say, okay, I still need my group to work coherently, but in order for them to all be there at one location on time, it means that you'll have to sacrifice the class. So you have to pick somebody maybe 4 out of 5 stars, 3 out of 5 stars, but still at least make it to the location. And then all of a sudden, yeah, you get people there, but the quality dwindles. So that's the dilemma that the officers face in the front. And Britain, for example, is saying that, yeah, their warehouses are running dry, so that it's a little hard to supply certain nomenclature. It raises certain discussion in their society, but they're reviewing the situation and they're looking for all the reasons and all the different angles of that situation. And me and Yuri were talking yesterday about what conclusions do Americans make? And they make very interesting conclusions there. They want to understand a lot of things. They learn and train on the basis of Ukraine. They recently had an exercise trying to understand how would they act without aerial support, because they usually do have 100% aerial support, but they're looking at Ukrainian fighting and they're trying to analyze what's the right way to wage war then in this case. And they analyze everything from gear to weapons to people. And they discovered an interesting thing, that one of the ways this war is waged, it went down to small tactical groups of 5 or 10 people in a group. It's the war of small groups, because a small group is you can run away from artillery. It's too costly to try to target them. So these have a chance, and that's what the war turned into. It's a group of 5 or 10 people fighting against the same group. So then it goes to the fact that your stormtroopers, your 5 or 10 people, need to be of a high quality in order to be able to capture enemy's positions in these numbers. And they need to be able to do that over and over again, not do once and then take a month off. And some people are fighting for weeks or years. So they understand that the average age of Ukrainian infantrymen doesn't carry, it's difficult for that age group to carry the load. So they highlight that we need to change the structure of conscription. because 45 years old, of course, can serve well in certain specialties, and they can shine with their certain qualities when they're careful, when they have strategic thinking, when they're observant, have some experience, so they can achieve good results in those positions. But for running 5 to 10 miles sprints and then fighting and then running more, you need younger groups for that. So that, our quality should be changed from physically good when the person can stand on skis in a good weather and don't fall, to somebody who actually can actively run. And the question is, can we change our mobilization to address these needs? To get the fighters who can be very mobile, who can be shooting right, who can be trained well. We have groups like that. We have Azov, we have 3rd Brigade, and there are a lot of mobilized people there, but they got an officers and sergeant corps that trains people in a certain manner that allows them to get the right rhythm, spirit, and achieve the results. But the size of the army we have always implies that whenever you grow it like that, then the quality of this army inevitably goes down, because one of the most common military specialties, commander of a platoon, sergeant, commander of a company, they have a very high attrition rate. Very often they get wounded and need to be replaced. And here you need to keep fighting to carry the most difficult fights on your shoulders, and it's a difficult problem. So out of different aspects of review of our strategy, we indeed need to look differently at the way we form the stormtroopers. How do we train them? How do we supply them? And you should know that Russians have figured that a while ago. They've returned to the tactics of storm groups that they tried in 1943, actually, when the line of Red Army was that every platoon, every company should have a storm group, where they would group the best fighters, the ones who can physically in good shape, who can run, who can shoot, who can achieve tasks. An average doesn't get there. You need the best. And it's difficult. You need a special group. You need not an average one. You need a special group that actually will go and get a certain level of enjoyment from their successes. So it needs to be reviewed. Russia started reviewing that after Kharkov operation about a year ago. So that statement by Wallace, this is not inter-Ukrainian statement, right? It's not us, let's say, talking about here on that stream. It's the Minister of Defense of Britain who is making the statement. It's Britain that is going to provide even more training to our troops. I understand in Ukraine, no, there was a misspoke. They will take our 30,000 troops to train them. And they already are training our troops. They're just opening more capabilities, so they'll have at least 30,000 slots. But besides health, there is also a moral component. In order to prepare a good detachment, while nobody's listening to us, right? I'll tell you real truth. Commanders don't like bright subordinates. You usually have issues with them. They bring problems. If you have 3 Spartacus, 2 Julius Caesars, and 4 Napoleons in your platoon, you're done. Everybody has his own opinion, and they're doing what they want. The bright ones need to become officers. They need to be selected and trained. And soldier needs to be a very well-trained mid-level person. Because the best of success in military is replication of success. The soldier at war often acts same as in peacetime, only 10 times worse. Do you know why they draw that 10, that very large 10 on the target, and then there are concentric circles around it? Because if you shoot 10 at peacetimes, you likely will shoot somewhere between 1 and 10 in the conditions of war. So it's endless repetition. One needs to be able to replicate his actions over and over again. That's how American Marines are acting and trained. So now tell me, when you have a very different group, it could be some very successful IT manager in your group, and there could be a driver of a taxi, and there could be an engineer. how do you train them and the training facilities? How do you motivate them to go storm that trench once again, to have a higher chance of survival? But some of them, especially when they get by over 40, they may tell, what, I'd rather die than keep digging or keep running. And that's true. That's what people do. It's easier to motivate the youngsters. You can create a certain competition of wills and achievements, that boyish attitude of who pees higher on that wall. So it's much easier to train people who can be motivated like that. So youngsters are much easier to train. And that's why the whole military is focused at that. And when people, actually, there's a good advice when people are quarreling, when they're fighting with each other in your group, one of the pedagogical motions recommended for the officer to put these two next to each other and start suppressing them, like really hard, in order for them to basically unite against you and rebelling against you, so they stop fighting. But that doesn't quite work when you are 45, when you are 40, 45, 50. Imagine, Nikolai, put you and Yuri together and start trying to oppress you a bit in order to make sure you don't fight. You'll look at me and say, what the F does he want? So as people get older, they get their opinions and they get their attitudes. So it's better to have the ones who are 23, 25 years old. It's much easier to train them and much easier to get certain results. Sorry for interrupting you here, Alexey. I remember my school days. And we had a different task in our group. We were laughing and we decided to lose everything and to win the last position in the contest. So there was a moment there when we leave the forest, when we exit the forest, and there's a small group of us coming with gas masks from the forest to the finish line, and we walk and slowly, leisurely walk to the finish line, and somebody in the judge is screaming at us, saying, look at these efforts, they're not even running. So exactly, yeah, at 45 you won't even run. And Marines in the United States, they endlessly repeat basic actions they need to execute over and over again. You learn maybe 10, 12 main actions on the battlefield, and if you're good at doing them, you will actually repeat them, be able to repeat them alone, in a group, in a platoon, in a company. You'll be able to repeat them on a battlefront. You'll be afraid, you'll be vomiting, but because of the motor functions, your body will still be able to do that. But this entertainment not for guys of 45 plus. They don't want to do that. Their life experience does not afford them to do that. And that's a whole other problem. I think we dedicated enough time to that. But I think we can see the complexity of that problem. There are no little things in solving this war. It's not the question of atoms only. It's the question of winter dress, about radio stations, about the trigger. Can you pull it in winter clothes? How do your shoes react if you step on oil? Can your uniform withstand fire? How fast does it dry? There's a lot of details and aspects of everything. Not just slogans. Slogans are good, but you also need systemic, tedious work. And also it's nice when you don't have corruption and the fight of egos, then maybe you achieve something. And in the West, the culture of administering, even military administering, is much higher than here. And they highlight our weak points. I've seen Western analysis, and they're very detailed in reviewing the issues, almost down to the level of the size of a needle that you have to fix your dress. So when they give recommendations, they are not coming out of the blue. They have spent a lot of time researching and analyzing. And that goes to many industries, not just military. And that Ukrainian publication that also reprinted some of these foreign advisory stuff, it was a deep analysis into different things that we can do. How do we change little things in our society that can give a great output in terms of fighting corruption and bettering other processes. So for us, autumn is time to change the strategy. We need to slow down, soberly look around and pick the right strategy, radically change what we do. That Cossacks energy that we had initially at the beginning of this war, I think we ran out of that steam. I think by the end of this spring we ran out of it. We were driving on inertia for a while after, and it doesn't mean we need to stop our action. We just need to change how we do it. It's a different story now. Look, Alexey, I wanted to say here that you're saying there are no little things. Everything needs to be taken into account. I think it's also part of your expertise when you are concentrating your effort on recruitment effort, on how we build army. Yeah, of course. Instructors of our People's Reservists, that organization I led back in the day, they are actively aiding these days. They're helping to get recruits, to train them. So absolutely, yes. And in the frame that we have, I'm sorry, it's already 40 minutes live, right? I want to say that strategy needs to be adapted. There are no small things. We need to indeed go deep diving into the thread, into the backup kit and everything for our soldiers. But the main areas where we need to concentrate is military technical aspect and cadre aspect. Because right now we do not handle our cadre well. I understand at the beginning of war, when everybody was mobilized and people were throwing rifles from trucks into people's hands because you needed to arm everybody just to make sure that they can shoot. But we've been for a year and a half in this war, so we need to change these things. This is an issue not to the army, this is an issue that needs to be addressed to the leadership. Because army is limited by certain norms and laws, so these things need to be reviewed. And now we go back to our Duma, to our Senate. What are they doing there? Okay, I suggest maybe we go to the map, Alexey, now. Dima, can you bring the map? And look, people looking at the situation near Robotina, and I'm asking questions here, as well about Tokmak and that other stronghold. So you're saying that we need to slow down and rethink. What if we manage to push down and manage to reach Tokmak? But then we will be troubled by that long protrusion that will be here, if it'll be in the same shape. Correct me if I'm wrong, or maybe people who are telling me are wrong. Would that be an issue? Well, first about that protrusion, they got two paratroopers division trying to cut us, and they destroyed 4 detachments in 2 weeks. They failed. They grinded down 2 very notable detachments of paratroopers. And they're rather well prepared ones. They failed to cut even that little protrusion we have. So where would they take better troops to cut a bigger one? And then nobody says we need to stop and at this protrusion. Our main effort should be to cut the railroad that goes through Tokmak, because the whole Russian front in the south is standing on these 2 feet, on these 2 legs. One is Crimean Bridge, another is that railroad. So if you cut one, you have your strategic success at 50% already. So I think we should not stop our counteroffensive until we cut the road, because that will be devaluing the whole effort. We need to get at least to Tokmak. And then we need to enlarge, to fortify, to provide fire cover for the territories around us. Because we understand that if we get to Tokmak, our artillery and our missiles can reach way further than now. Right now, Tokmak is being shelled regularly, but when we cut the railroad, that'll force them to supply by trucks and the Crimean Bridge. And trucks is a very difficult story. Aviation, drones, and other means can reach trucks. So in this case, it's the end of the way for them, basically by Kherson scenario. When we started hitting the bridge, they were still trying to hold onto Kherson for a while, but everybody understood that it will be the end of it. Sooner or later, they'll be done with, and that's what happened. Same thing is going to happen here. So we need to go down south, we need to cut the road, capture that big junction, and then we can reach other roads, the ones that go to Melitopol at the bottom, and the ones that go by the sea. And by the way, by the main roads, it's much easier to continue our motion. And you can see that this road leads to Berdyansk and Melitopol. So if we want to do the next stage of counteroffensive, maybe in spring or winter, however long it'll take us to accumulate enough forces, but it'll be a good situation for the next day. So we need to go back to the effort of cutting the rail line and then reorganize as we prepare for the next stage. If we do not reorganize, if we do not find new solutions, we might get stuck at Tokmak. Because all these concerns that our allies are bringing, they're real concerns. And we're really facing that danger, so we need to change our strategy in order to address that. And it's not the only place where you can cut the rail line. See Великая Новоселка, Заветное Желание, Приютное, you can also continue moving there. But Russians brought more reserves there, and it's more difficult. Even under these conditions, it's difficult to move forward. The terrain is different, the ratio of troops is different, and then somewhere down south there is an untouched 35th Army, about 4 brigades and 4 or 5 detachments, which hasn't fought yet. So they can still bring it to the place where we start active motion. So it's not exactly so simple there. And they're also planning to bring some troops from the east because they consider that to be a real problem. They understand that they're not going to succeed much in the east. They understand that they need to stop us in the south. So, and for them it will be a catastrophe. So they might bring more troops from here. So in the meantime, in the Bakhmut, south of Bakhmut, the heavy fighting still ensues in Klishevka and Andreevka and Kurdyumovka. Actually, Klishevka and Andreevka are taken. They're more or less okay. Maybe not much lighter, but we haven't heard as much from them. We actually heard a lot about heavy fighting in Kurdyumovka. And then we go north, more fighting here, and same motions on the line of Kupiansk-Kremenная. Continuous attempts of our enemy to attack us all the way near Belogorovka, and they're fighting in the forestry in that area too, without much change. Also this week there were conversations about a threat towards Torskaya. Do you know any information there? Well, these threats, they periodically appear. The question is how real they are. I do not believe they have any reality under those pieces of information that surfaced. It's a very specific locale. But in general, of course, there is a threat, and Russians are trying to shift their lines of attack, and they understand that they can attack new detachments that just got to the front, or maybe the ones that are getting ready to rotate and are tired. So everybody's looking for an angle. And the fact remains, however, that until the infantryman reaches the enemy's trench, and that age of UAVs, radioelectronic warfare, cruise missiles, infantryman was solving tasks 3,000 years ago near Troy, and it's still doing it now, and will probably be doing the same thing thousands of years from now. All right, Alexey, we are at minute 43, but I believe there is some interesting news related to Poland, and before their elections we have to spend some time and pay attention to what's happening there. It seems like the negativity still develops on that front. I see at least 3 events like that. First of all, the weapons forum that occurred in Ukraine. It happened bright, and we signed a few contracts. It was a success. Yet, representatives of Poland and their defense industry were not present. We actually have joint production with these guys and seem to have some good moment there, but they're telling us that we did not send invite. We're saying that we have invited them pretty much the first, and this is not a good situation in this light. And Prime Minister of Poland, Mateusz Morawiecki, warned our president from a close union with Germany. He says that I understand that Zelensky thinks now that he will have close relations with Germany. I want to warn you that Germany will always want to unite with Russia through the heads of countries in Central Europe. So I understand his hint, as the way I see it. He thinks that Ukraine is spoiling its relations with Poland in order to promote their relations with Germany, or is it just an election card that he is playing? I think Poles have their own illusions, and when they come out with statements about Germany, I really get surprised, because frankly, there are no signs of real warm up between Ukraine and Germany right now. The fact that we supported the candidacy of Germany as the member of the Security Council of the United Nations, okay, but is that a reason enough? Germans gave us Taurus to use against Russian targets in Russian territory. Again, is that a reason? I don't know. Is our relations good with Poland? How are relations with United States? How are they with UK? So we have issues with many of our partners, and all of a sudden everything moves good with Germany. So I suspect it's interesting when everything is not so good, and then we have issues with all of our allies, and then suddenly we're so great with Germany. I suspect that is not exactly a true picture. So I think Poles may have their own view of the world that is a little skewed. I'm actually surprised that they're bringing it up in the picture. I am concerned about our relations with Poland. That's another angle. But bringing that in light that Ukraine is getting cozy with Germany to dump Poland, I think that's Polish fears. I don't see any real significant warm-up with Germany on our side. Maybe there is some secret activity that I'm not aware of, but I strongly suspect this is not so. And that's why I'm saying smart people do not break communications. People break their comms at the 6th grade or in the kindergarten. I'm not talking to you and you'll go to jail, right? Adults, they still get together, they discuss, they may not do it in public, but they still gather together and figure out what to do. So these politics, when we yell at each other from the United Nations pulpit and then figuring out in the background who's going where and how we resolve these issues, that's not exactly the right way. I think the smart way would have been to resolve everything behind the scenes and step on our own egos and sit down and look at the actuals. Poles did surprise me with their concerns about Germany, but we're not at our best game as well. It would be good if we had somebody reasonable to stop this idiocy, because I think today the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Poland made a statement. I think it was him, among all the news. I'm trying to remember who did that. He said that Ukraine and Poland will have to make a serious effort to overcome the pit that appeared in our relations. And right now we are going down in relations. That's true. And you can read that in the quotes, because you allowed politicians to get stubborn, and we are in the situation when we cannot afford such a luxury. We need to step on the throat of that tune and go and negotiate and figure out how we cooperate with Poland, because us going with Russia in the 17th century changed the whole story of Europe and the story of the world. It could have been a better story if we joined effort with Poland, and I hope we will find a way to do it this time, and we would not make mistakes that we did in the 17th century and early on in the 20th century. And there is a bunch of idiots on both sides. They of course have nationalists too, who also stomp their feet and yell loud. We should not be allowing these two little groups to resolve, and affect the destinies of these two countries, and in the longer term, the destiny of Europe and the whole world. This is a kindergarten or a 6th group of some middle school with very wicked children. What's happening now? Yura, I think you wanted to say something and we interrupted you. Yeah, I just wanted to say that the story shows that in general, both Poles and ourselves are prisoners of our own illusions. Our illusions are about lobbying the interests of oligarchs, and think that nobody will react to that when we're getting too bold. aiding a small group to making a lot of money when they want. And for Poles who are also, and I mean the ruling party PiS there, who is using that rhetoric, they also need to exit the framework of these illusions that everybody in Ukraine is somehow pro Bandera, that no Ukrainians want to resolve the issue of exhumation of Polish officers who were killed and citizens who were killed in 1943, and also get away from the mythology about relations between Ukraine and Germany, that somehow we may break relations with Poland in order to be closer with Germany. That would allow us to realize certain short-term economic interests. So, looking at that, me and Alexey are not just guessing. We actually know that Polish elites, they do not fully understand the situation that's here. And that's what Alexey talked about before. It's a very serious question. System communication between politicians, between expert communities on both sides, and media sources on both sides about joint interests of our peoples. And accordingly, promotion and moving forward in that. If we will not have a systematic communication in these aspects, we will keep bumping into these issues. It'll be unproductive, and we need to switch from all the chatter to actual work. We need to start building things. We cannot be talking about these projects anymore. We need to get connected and start building things together. And we have not yet started. We are talking a lot, our government is talking, discussing a lot, but we haven't really picked up the projects that European Union is developing there, that is trying to force feed us, to include us in those projects, to motivate us to join. And we are still ignoring it because we supposedly do not want to waste our resources on that. So, in all these questions, there is a lot of delusions, I think, or misunderstanding that is related to having very different realities and seeing things at different angles. These are amazing things I want to say, because on one hand, what Ukraine and Poland do not know about each other. We know everybody, we live next to each other, but I want to highlight that information and level of for being informed is very overvalued right now, because you'd think information is available, but then all of a sudden the person is absolutely not aware of what's happening. That situation when, politically somebody is laying in the next room to you and you're close, you talk to each other, but you find that you have very different worldviews. So communication is super important. We need to talk. We need to share, because communication is basically a saving tool in this situation, because you can bring your realities closer together and you can allow your opponent, your partner, to see situation the way you see that. Very often they have insights just trying to change their point of view and understand you. But when you break communication, then illusions get stronger, then all the accusations grow stronger, and it has zero relation to reality. Everything is very different, problems are different, everything was different. But when there's no communication, people just go down that spiral. And I want to remind that the basis of the Western civilization are two major processes: communication and cooperation. Because cooperation cannot ensue without communication. If we break communication, there will be no cooperation. And if we do not cooperate with Poland, then it will be much worse for both of us. And then the whole world will also feel that. The only country that will feel better will be Putin's Russia. Yeah, Putin's Russia. Thank you for that stream, gentlemen. We have a lot of questions yet to touch that we did not discuss today. I think we'll just move them, transfer them to our Saturday stream on Saturday at 9 p.m., right? Are we doing Thursday? Yeah, let's do Thursday. I'm sorry, yeah. Thursday is the next stream, and then we have Saturday. So Thursday we can do 10 p.m. live stream, Kiev time. And guys, my mono stream will be tomorrow. I cannot do it today, just out of energy. Thank you everybody who watched us today. Do not forget to click like button. If you are watching that in English, do not forget to support that manner and Privateer Station. Click the like, click the bell, and we'll see you in the next stream. Have a good night.